New England. And I know it's very cold down in Texas where Anne is. So yeah, just chaos everywhere. Okay. So we can see my screen. Hurrah. All right, doing it live. All right, thank you everybody for joining our talk today. Quick introductions. If you don't know who I am Megan Boshuyzen. I am the senior email developer at Cinch. You may know and love a couple of our brands that we have and that I code our emails for, which are Mailgun, Mailjet, and Email on Acid. The text is blurry. I'm sorry. Let me see if I can make this bigger. Let's see. Font size. Nope, not 15. So I go up to like 21. Does this look better to people? We have a file that we have together, and we will share the preview link for it for people to see the code. All right, cool. I might have to turn my camera off if my sharing. I'm going to do that. I'm turning my camera off for now, and maybe you will be able to see all this stuff better. Okay, cool. All right, so like I said, I'm the senior email developer at Cinch. I code a lot of emails for Mailgun, Mailjet, Email on Acid. I maintain our email design system and all that jazz. I code my emails using divs and ghost tables. So I do not use traditional table layouts. I use divs. And yeah, let me throw it over to you, Anne, to introduce yourself. Oh, wait, Anne, you're muted.
Can you hear me now? I'm sorry.
Yeah, hear you now.
Okay. Hi, I'm Ann Tomlin. I've been in email for about 13 years, and I've been email developer, and I have my own company called Emails Y'all, and I have clients like NPR, Cameo, and Chipotle. I code in with a table-based layout, specifically the fluid hybrid technique. So I do that mostly because it allows stacking for email clients that don't support media queries. So that's definitely one of the reasons why I do that. So yeah, one of the things is I am always on my machine, on my desktop machine. So I always end up looking at the desktop first. So that's how I usually code, is desktop first. But we'll get into that. Sorry.
Yeah. Oh no, Anne's jumping right into it.
Yeah, sorry.
So we have a couple of different files set up here. The base code is mostly the same, but we'll talk about a couple of different things. So the first thing we're going to jump into is media queries. Anne, do you want to start and highlight your media query CSS and talk us through why you do the whole desktop first thing and how you write that and whatnot?
Sure. Let's talk about the polls first, though.
Oh, yes, the polls. I forgot about the polls. Naomi, cue up the polls. We got polls.
Yeah.
I'm coming.
We wanted to, see how many are, what the difference is between everybody that's here, all 878 people. So our first question would be, how do you code emails? Are you doing it table-based or div-based?
Oh, we can do it too, Anne, and put our votes in.
I did not get a thing, so I don't know. I can't see if people...
You got to click. Yeah, polls. You got to click on the little polls icon.
Oh, there we go. All right, awesome.
Yeah,
great. All right, so most...
Oh, man, no one doing div-based. My heart broken. Not really. Man, we got things to talk about.
Yeah, well, but that's a interesting, statistic.
Not surprising. Right.
And Megan, how about the second poll?
Yeah, Naomi, you can throw, I don't know if you can throw more than one up at a time.
Yep. Do you want me to just put them all up?
Yeah, just
Or
do all
do
three up.
next?
Yeah, let's just throw them all up.
Okay.
So yeah, we're asking about what kind of technique do you use? A traditional, like just non-responsive type of email, the fluid hybrid method, or maybe a traditional responsive, a regular responsive using aligns and media queries. That's what we're saying is the responsive technique. And yeah, if you do plan on using tables, do you plan on switching to a div-based layout at some point? And seems like a lot of people are saying no. So I am actually quite surprised by that, because if we're all so excited about Outlook, in 2026, then we need to move to a div-based layout. But maybe we'll get into that later.
Yeah.
All
for
right.
sure.
So thank you, everybody, for your participation in the polls. That is really interesting information. The first thing that we wanted to get into about the differences that we have in the ways that we code is a desktop first versus mobile first type of thing. So let's see. So these right here, these are my media queries. Remember, I use the fluid hybrid method, so I'm coding mostly in tables. So this is more sort of the traditional way of coding an email, starting with desktop and then changing it via media queries for mobile. And that's what you can see here is what I'm doing. I'm using a max width for the mobile, for the mobile media query, and also creating one for the what I call the in-between states. So yeah, and like I was saying, I am always on my computer. I very rarely am on my phone. I also did a little bit of research and found that 46% of opens are on mobile. Now, that may be skewed because of the, Apple MPP, but in general, we can pretty much say it's mobile use on the rise, but not completely there yet. So yeah, that's why I choose to do desktop first.
Cool. So I am now going to talk about doing min width media query. So I code mobile first, which is quite a mind shift when you're coding, since we are coding on desktops. Trying to think about doing something going from one column to two columns or three columns instead of multi-column and back down to one column it's a little bit of a shift. But I code mobile first because first off, you always bring your life experiences into whatever you do. And I live and die by my phone. Being a parent, almost all my shopping is done on my phone. I am only on my laptop nowadays if I am doing work. So otherwise, emails, I am almost always looking at my personal emails on my phone. I look at my emails in extra hard mode, and that I use the Gmail app in dark mode, and images off. So important to optimize for all of those situations. So with the min width media query, instead of like with Anne, how we have stuff here, what we do is that we put all of our code for mobile first, which means if we look at like columns, sorry, I'm moving around so much, set the display as table instead of something like block or inline block. And I set that width to 100%. So that when we go to our media query for that min width, we say anything over 480 pixels, which is like our general breakpoint for mobile, that width is going to go to 50%. We're going to change that display to table cell. And then we're just adding a padding of 1M so that we can, have padding around. So if I take our window and go down, you will see it all stack. And there's our basic stacking. And Anne and I did things in slightly different ways. And that's really the basics. You can do it either way. I personally recommend always going mobile first, because if you're depending on media queries and your media queries break for whatever reason, then you're in Ganga, it's the non-Google account using Google. You don't have to worry about that layout completely breaking. It'll just default back to that one column instead of potentially having a problem of multiple columns showing on a small screen. Instead, you'll have that one column showing on a bigger screen, which in my opinion is the more ideal situation. If something's going to break, it just, degrades gracefully.
And using the fluid hybrid method, if media queries are not supported, it does stack in mobile. Probably not as nicely as Megan's code, but that is a feature of doing a fluid hybrid technique.
Yep, for sure.
All right, so let's talk about columns. I mean,
yes,
columns are the main structure of our emails. Like that's what makes allows us to make everything so pretty. So
yes.
yeah, let's talk about some columns. So you can see here, let's see, yes, perfect. All right.
Yes.
So the way that you do fluid hybrid columns is by doing by using a ghost table for Outlook, because as we know, Outlook doesn't like max width. It absolutely has to have a specified width for it. So the way to do that is to use a ghost table, which is this right here. And currently, for this example, we were going for a 50-50, two column right next to each other type of thing. So that's why there is a width of 50% inside the ghost table. Anyway, well, we also have a div here that starts the kind of left column, the left non-Outlook column. And you can see that we've got a max width here as well and display inline block. So what that does is it says, all right, so this column can't be more than 300 pixels. And it's got a display inline block. So there's nothing around it. So that allows the second column, the right column, which also has a max width of 300 and display inline block, that allows it to move over. And so they are right next to each other. And that definitely is, the way. And the good part about this is that the display inline block is what allows the code to stack in mobile without media queries. But of course, most of our email clients do support media queries. So we are doing a class on each of these divs. And then up in the head, under the max width media queries, you can see that we've got right here. What I'm doing is for the in between widths. I'm doing 49%. So that's why these, when you move when it gets narrower, both of the columns shrink. And you can't. I have found that using 50% can cause some issues in some ESPs. So that's why I'm using 49%. But you can also see that up in the mobile media query, I'm doing it setting the max width to 100. So that's just a really quick breakdown of how you do columns in fluid hybrid. Also one more thing. There's you could make this even easier if you use a max width of like 50%. So that is another way to do that, successfully. So
all right, so let's talk about how to do this if you do not plan on using a bunch of tables and you use the div plus ghost table strategy. So what we do here is that we start off with a ghost table. So we're going to use this if true, which is just another way to target Microsoft Outlook, and it just targets it across the board. If you need to do more specific targeting, there are ways to do that, and you can target based on the version. And we're also going to use this if false and if not true. So the first thing we do is that we open up this table and we set the opacity to 0. And then what we need to do is this if false and close it out. This is for if you are supporting T-Mobile.de. That's a German ESP. I think it's German. And because that ESP, or not ESP, the inbox will read the MSO comments. So this just closes out the table so that it doesn't mess with the layouts. And from there, we move to our container. And we often will use this if not true, so that Outlook does not read the div, but it does read just the table. Oh, I have some extra divs in here, I think, that I meant to take out. You can ignore that when I was editing my code. So we have our container to, it's essentially containing the row. And from there, we have our TD width to 50%. That's for Outlook to read. And then we go if not true, then we have these divs, which everything else will read except Outlook. And we just nest everything in here. This does something very specific, and we will get to it in a few minutes. But you can see here, it's a lot less code to get up and running. It can be a little bit confusing because of these like if trues, if not trues and whatnot. But once you get your head wrapped around that, it's a lot less code than using the tables to get these columns up and running. So you can see we have our image and we have another div for text. When we do the column stacking stuff, I'll explain why I have that extra div. And as we go down, then when we're ready to end one column and start the next, you just throw in that MSO code, you close out the div. You could technically put it together like this and just open up the next div. That is your preference. Then we open up the next one at 50%, and then we just repeat. And if, say, you need 3 divs, then you just rinse, repeat, change the percentages to 33%. If you need 4 divs, 25%, whatever you need. Very easy to repeat and add and remove as you need them. And at the very end, we just close it out. We have our div, close out the rest of the table. So with here, it'll read the MSO stuff, not read the div stuff, and then we are done. And that's all it takes to get columns up and running using divs and ghost tables. I love using divs, especially for like progressive enhancement stuff. I think it's nice to be able to nest some divs that are not for Outlook without having to worry about having all these other tables to wade through. So it is, in the end, a little bit less code. It might not be a ton of less code by the time you need all the ghost tables, but it's definitely less to maintain and go through. So yeah, Anne, do you want to talk about how you stack tables?
Yeah, so
or the columns, I should say.
Yeah, so how to reverse stack columns, which actually, thank you, Sarah, for saying that changing via direction is not accessible. I actually did not know that, so that's something that I've learned, but I am going to show you how to do that. So let's see. First, what you would want to do using a direction is with the fluid hybrid method, you want to be able to, or you want to put the direction on the containing TD. So normally, at least with English, it's left to right. So we're going to say right to left, right? And you can see that this changes, the order of the columns, just right there. But if you also look at the punctuation is now at the end on the left side. We don't want that. So on the divs, you need to set a new direction of left to right, and that solves the punctuation issue. So this is something you definitely need to, if you decide you want to do reverse the stacking, this is an important thing to do. I once left it off, and that was not a good experience. So it's definitely something you need to think about and practice.
And if you're not messing in tables and using the direction attribute, you can do this using CSS. So looking at my code, I have this column bottom and column top. So if we head up to the CSS, and I wrote left and right, so that we could see which one was the left and which one is the right, since like they're equal in every other way. So here, this is where our display comes in again. So for the top, we have table header group. In the bottom, we have table footer group, and I set the width to 100%. We may or may not actually need that. But when we go, now you can see that the right column is on top and the left column is on the bottom. I do not know if this is accessible. I don't have the chat open. I don't know if Sarah, who is my queen of accessibility, has any comments about that. I pretty much default to her on everything accessibility, learning all the time. But yeah, that's the way you can do it with CSS. And it's super easy. The one con to using this display table header group and table footer group is that you cannot use padding with it, which is why I have these extra divs down here that says text, just so that the text does not hit the bounds of the email, and that we have a little bit of a padding there and some white space. So it does cause you to put in another div, but not a super big deal to be able to do everything with CSS.
Cool. All right, so let's move on to the next thing and talk about buttons. So first I'm going to start, and we're going to talk about a fixed width button. So what we have, let me see.
Hold on.
Okay,
All right,
yeah,
we're waiting for this to load up.
Oh, okay. All right, cool. Yeah, I mean, so I have actually like 3 different types of buttons that I have in my boilerplate, and I use all 3 of them. So yeah, the first one that I use, I don't use it as often anymore, but is the fixed width button. Exactly what Megan has just highlighted here. So the way that you start with a fixed width button is, of course, with a ghost table, because once again, we're using a max width here, and yeah, Outlook really doesn't like max width, so we've got to give it a ghost table and set the actual the width on the ghost table. So one kind of, I would say, drawback about this type of button is that you do have to set a height, and that's what's happening on the TD here. So we've got so you set the height, but that doesn't make the entire button height clickable. So what you have to do in order to make all of the space of your button clickable is add padding on the actual anchor tag. I know that's usually not a thing that people like to do, but that's what you need. And it's going to take some trial and error when you use this type of button to know how much padding, top and bottom padding to use to get the entire button to be clickable. So that is one sort of, not so great thing about it. So yeah, that's a fixed width button. Like I said, don't use it super often, but it is, there definitely are situations in which it is absolutely necessary. So the other button that we'll be talking about is a VML button. And VML is a vector markup language, and it is a language specifically that we use for Outlook. So you can see here that this button is first starting with a regular fixed width button, which we just said, except without the ghost table, because we're going to provide Outlook with this with the VML. So we don't really need the ghost table in the in the fixed width button. So, but you can also see that we're commenting out just for Outlook. We're using the if not MSO conditional. And so everybody or everything except for Outlook can see the fixed width button. And then this conditional, the if MSO, is if you're using Outlook, show this part. So and the really great thing about this is the only using a VML button like this is the only way to get rounded corners in Outlook. So it is possible. You just have to use a VML button, which you can see is what's happening here. So first, we've got to start with a rounded rectangle, and we're linking it, of course. Oh, yeah. Sorry, these are kind of difficult to get to. All right. So, yeah, so we've also got to, also state a width and height as well on the rounded rectangle. And of course, we've got the arc size, the rounded corners, and doing a fill color as well. So basically what you were doing is we're starting with a linked, rounded rectangle, and then we're placing text on top of that rounded rectangle. And that's what the center tag is. You see, we've got these, inline styles and such. And so that's the VML button. One thing to keep in mind if you're going to use VML buttons is that there are basically 2 buttons in this code. So you have to remember to if you are changing the link or the text or anything about the buttons, you're going to have to do it in 2 places. First you'll do it in the fixed width button, and then next you'd have to do it in the VML button. So if your brand absolutely requires a rounded corner in Outlook, it is possible, but you might want to warn people ahead of time that it will be difficult for people who are not familiar with code. It will be difficult for them to actually make the changes inside the ESP or whatever visual editor they're using. So they would have to go into the code and do the changes. So that is the one kind of like not so great thing about the VML button. But it is possible to have rounded corners in Outlook.
Do you think rounded corners are a progressive enhancement? Because I do.
I have had many situations where clients say it's absolutely necessary to have rounded corners, and they are willing to do the work.
All right.
So
I think it's a progressive enhancement. I also refuse to work in VML unless I really, really have to. All right. So with all of that, let's go over how I do my buttons. So a lot of the way I code, I just want to make this comment. This code might look really familiar. A lot of the ways that I code, and a lot of it might look familiar to some people. I've learned a lot of my coding from Mark putting up a lot of the way that he shares. So I code in a very similar way. I don't want anybody thinking that like I developed any of this on my own. I did not. But this lovely community shares and we all learn from each other. All right. So one thing that I do want to call out that I tend to do that I've noticed is a little bit different from like my code snippets and Anne's code snippets is that I put as much CSS as possible in the head. And because I code in Parcel, there's a transformer to inline all your code. So I let Parcel handle that for me. I know not everybody likes to let a program inline their code for them and would rather do it manually. Yeah, you're not the only person I know. I've done it for long enough that I feel pretty confident to let it inline for me. There are very few times where I feel like it's hindered me, and it's easier for me to read the code. So I just do as much as I can in classes and put it in the head, and then you have your source down here. I don't have any transformers on right now, but then like when you would look at the source down here, you would see it all inlined. So I just wanted to make that call out. Just because on here we have our button class with none of the styles. So to create this button class, we're primarily using some padding. So let's go look at our style. So we just set everything here. We have our padding, no text decoration, our color. We inline block it. If we want a border radius on it, we can do that. We have MSO padding alt on there so that Outlook does not add any additional padding. The text underline color, I sometimes remove that. Sometimes I find it causes a problem out Outlook. Sometimes it doesn't because Outlook. So sometimes I may remove that. And I just added in this margin top just to give it some space from here. I don't always use a margin top. Depends on the design and whatnot. Usually my buttons are in their own table and row and whatnot. So if we head back down to the button, let me go like this. Oh, we're gonna move. There we go. All right, so there are a couple of other key things here. So for Outlook, that padding can always act a little strange. So we take our little italics element, which is a trick that I did learn from Mark, and we mess with our MSO font width and we raise the text. And this will, in doing things this way, will help us control the horizontal padding. And this little character, I believe this is an M space. I might still be using a non-breaking space. It kind of differs. But you just need a little character there for a space to control it. And from there, we also have a span style where we raise the text 50%, and that helps control our vertical padding. So we do that on each end of the button, and that will control our padding on the top, bottom, left, and right. With this code, you will not get rounded corners in Outlook. That is by design. Again, progressive enhancement, in my opinion, unless the client's paying you a lot of money to do the VML. And it's just a smaller piece of code and pretty easy to maintain.
I'd like to point out that I use this button. This button that Megan just explained is the button that I use almost all the time.
Yeah.
So you don't have to, you can take elements of both of our coding techniques and mesh
For
them.
sure.
So,
use the best technique for whatever you're trying to accomplish.
totally.
I think this whole thing is kind of showing how we can do things in many different ways. They all have their pros and cons for them.
Absolutely.
All right.
So
yeah, we're coming to the end here. Like, wow, I can't believe it took us so long to talk about a lot of this. Let's talk about fonts real quick, because I'd like to answer some questions. All right, you want to kick it off, Anne?
Yes. Okay. So last thing we're going to talk about is fonts and the ways that you are able to import web fonts. So the way that I prefer how to do it is through Font Face. And you should be able to see. Awesome. Thank you. All right. So This is actually a font face declaration inside the email. So you're probably wondering where I got this. And the way that that you get this sort of font face declaration, if you're using something like Google Fonts or another service, is you will take the link that that service provides you, and when you, yeah, perfect. Yeah, you'll get a list of huge, all the different types of, yeah, of the fonts, but you're going to go for the Latin one. And one thing to definitely keep in mind is, for one thing, you do not need the unicorn, I'm sorry, the Unicode part of that. You can just nix that out. That's not necessary. But okay, so we can see here that we've got the one that's a normal weight and a normal style. Well, if we keep scrolling down, we're actually going to see that there is an additional font face declaration that is for a regular style with a bold with 700 for the font weight. So we actually need to have both of those in the code. Can we go back to the code, please? Yeah, awesome. So what we want to do, though, is or what I find to be the most easiest way of dealing with things is you want to keep the same font family name for all of your statements of I'm sorry, you want to keep the same font family name so you can reference it all over your document, and that will allow you, because you've said you're using the same font family name, and you have two different font face declarations, one for regular and one for bold. So you don't have to put, you don't have to say, okay, now I'm using Oswald bold. You just have to put Oswald and then a font weight of 700. So that's the preferred way of doing things, because people created this font. They know what it should look like when it's bolded. So if you try to use something like a kind of a fake kind of bolding of just using a font weight, that's not exactly how that font might have been intended to look. So, and it only takes a couple seconds to put in a font face declaration. So it's totally worth that extra couple of seconds to put that in and have the right correct look to your font. One thing I will mention is that yes, this does definitely increase the weight of your email, which is definitely something that we have to care about. So you will need to weigh your options here, on the weight of your email to begin with. So maybe if you have a ton of weight, you might want to go with a different way, but of importing fonts. But font face is actually the most supported bulletproof way of implementing web fonts. And so this is how I normally do web fonts, and I get a lot of clients asking me to get to use their the fonts that are hosted on their website. So the one thing that you will have to do if you're using if you're getting your fonts from a server, from a website, is you have to go and find those font face declarations, and it can take a really long time to do that. So, but one good thing about that, though, is that you are when you're importing it from a from your website's server, you get to choose what kind of font type that you want, a WAF, a TTF, EOT, whatever. You get to choose. So that's another like pretty awesome thing about using font face. So
And I might be changing to font face because usually all I do is go to Google, grab the link stuff, and put it in the head. But it sounds like font face might be the better way to go. I do it this way because I have my email design system. I cover 3 different brands. I am likely going to be adding even more brands to that email design system. So for me, and the way that's set up with a lot of stuff swapping up via JSON and whatnot, I just do it this way, which is a perfectly good way to do it. You could always likely just take whatever URL that you're using from whatever website and pop it in there. But yeah, this is all I do for links. I might switch the other way though. Gonna have to think about that. And to wrap things up, we do have this sample file. I'll throw it in the chat in a minute. And I'll send it to Naomi and she can send it out in the email. This has like literally all the code that we went over so that you all can dive into it and take a look. Wow, that was a lot.
Yeah, that was. I didn't expect that to take that long, but we would love to answer any questions. That
might have time for one.
Okay.
Wait, Naomi can't hear you.
But I can't hear you. Well, I can see the first one is, do ghost tables work in Outlook 365? And the answer to that is yes. Yes, they do.
Yes. What doesn't read ghost tables is Outlook.com.
Yes,
that's div. That will read the divs.
Let's see. All right. Is it still best practice to use all 4 values when setting CSS padding, or is the shorthand supported in major email platforms? Yes, the shorthand is supported in most most email platforms. So yeah, I mean, use what you can. I mean, you used to have to write out, padding top, padding bottom, all that. So the fact that we can use even just the 4 values now is exciting. So yes, feel free to use the shorthand, any shorthand that you that you can.
Yeah, and if you find you're having a problem with any padding, Outlook does have the MSO padding alt, or however you write it, and I've had success with that in the past too. I use it every once in a while when I'm having issues with something. So yeah, you can always use that too.
Awesome. Great.
I see a quick question about preview text. Parcel has, just quickly, Parcel does have a thing up on their website with a fix for that. So I'd go take a look.
Yeah, I use that fix all the time.
Yep.
Yes, thank you, Parcel, for providing,
thank you.
A whole link that we can just go to every time we need, preview text hack.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we can hear you now.
Well, this is great timing. Sorry about that audio issue earlier. I will say there's still probably about 20 questions for you both sitting in the Q&A. So you have work cut out for you. But I just want to thank you both for taking the time to be here with us today. That was so fun just to see you both coding together and your different techniques. The recording will be available for anyone that was having streaming issues. It's clear on my side. The recording will be good to go. But yeah, thank you both again. Feel free to drop some links in the chat for where people can find you and follow up with you. But thanks so much. I'm going to send you